The Economics of Socialism emphasizes the chaos of the market. Prices are chaotic, they say, as are incomes that go with those prices. You know, some people are making way too much money and others way too little. Here I want to look at how inequality has changed over the past 50 years or so. What are the facts and what do they mean? The Economics of Socialism. One famous rendition of the data comes from the economist Thomas Piketty. He asserts that income inequality has exploded, with extreme divergence between social groups. This inequality is enormous and terrifying. But does this rendition tell us the whole story? Does any of the data show rising equality? In fact, there is. Moreover, this additional equality is the other side of the same coin of the additional inequality. Economics is not an a la carte menu. If you want policy to reduce what Piketty shows, we will have to pay for that in part with less equality in other dimensions. What's happening with the poverty rate over time? Is it going up? Here are a couple of measures. One is the official poverty rate, or OPM. It does not show an increase. Moreover, the OPM has some biases in it. It does not adequately adjust for inflation. Especially, it ignores most of the government assistance that low-income families get, especially in recent years. The FPM accounts for that. It shows that poverty has dropped by a factor of 6. Professor Piketty doesn't tell you about that. Here we see a big part of why the FPM is so low. A lot more people have been able to join government programs that provide food and medical care. One counter-argument to what I'm saying here is that Medicaid is not really for the poor. It's really for hospitals, which are owned and operated by high-income people. There's a lot of truth to that. This opens up a very interesting conversation about the real purpose of Medicaid. It's a program advertised as helping the poor, but maybe it has another purpose. Let's leave that as an unsettled question. But either we must conclude that poverty has fallen a lot, or that Medicaid is really a program for the benefit of high-income people. Here's a measure of inequality. This fits closely what Piketty was talking about. It measures the gap between what low-wage male workers earn versus high-wage male workers. That gap is a lot greater in the 21st century than it was in the 1960s. Now I want to add to this picture a measure of equality. That's in red. It is also a gap, namely female wages minus male wages. It's negative, but gets less negative over time. In other words, the genders are getting more equal over time in terms of their wages. Professor Piketty does not show you this. We don't see the extreme divergence between social groups that he described for us. Moreover, this equality maintains a tight relationship with the inequality. This suggests that in order to have one, maybe you need the other. That's just a suggestion. But let's look more closely at the relationship using the supply and demand for labor. Here is a way to look at labor supply and appreciate the connection between inequality and equality. I'm going to focus on the labor supply of women. Think of many of them as having, in principle, a choice between working in the market or working in the non-market sector, working at home, that is. Working at home does not pay cash, but it has value, and that value is shown in this picture as the reservation wage. The 45-degree line is important because above it, market wages exceed reservation wages. This will tend to describe women who work in the market. Below 45 degrees will tend to describe women who work outside the market. The other thing we have in this picture is that women are different from each other. They have different skills. They study different things in school. They have different interests. So the next thing we show is the relationship between the reservation wage and the market wage. In the 1960s or 1970s, it had a relationship like in the green. The women who worked above the 45-degree line had less earning potential than the average woman. Although we don't know exactly what non-working women would have earned if they had worked in the market, we see this in measures like education or IQ. Now let's look at an increase in inequality like Piketty talks about. That means that market wages fall for low-wage women and increase for high-wage women. In this picture, that's a counterclockwise rotation around the woman in the middle, as in the circle in the picture. In the 1970s, market wages were more equal, in a tight range. More recently, market wages are in a wider range, as in the purple line. The inequality that terrifies Piketty totally changes who works in this picture. More recently, it is the high skill or high wage women who work. Compare that to earlier when low wage women were the ones working. More high wage women at work now is a big reason why we measure higher wages for women now than we did years ago. And different types of women working does not just mean different names and social security numbers. The women themselves are different. They prepare themselves for work differently. These days they take different majors in college than they used to. Much of this is a result of rising inequality. In other words, inequality has proven to be opportunity for women. It has raised the return to going to college and taking different majors when they are there. Women especially responded by grasping those opportunities. Here is a way to look at labor supply and appreciate the connection. Here is another measure of the poverty rate. It is measured for the entire world. Unlike the United States series, this series does not have much to do with government assistance programs. It has to do with literally billions of people in China and India escaping poverty. That happened from additional freedoms, especially in China. China stopped being such an extreme socialist country in the late 1970s. Another factor is increased world trade. China and India traded with the US, for example. On the US side of those transactions, that meant that college-educated people who once would have been upper management in regional or national companies, by the 21st century found themselves upper management in worldwide companies. Managers of worldwide companies tend to earn more than managers of just regional companies. So again, we see a connection between rising equality, the poverty rate in this picture, and rising inequality. Is it terrifying that women in the US grasped the opportunities associated with higher returns to skill? Is it terrifying that so many poor people in China and India found opportunities to escape poverty? I don't think so. I don't know what Piketty thinks because he does not mention the important dimensions in which the world has become more equal, let alone acknowledging how it derives from the inequality that terrifies him.